Welcome to Ciao Bella, hosted by me, Erica Firpo, a travel journalist based in Rome. Each episode of Ciao Bella, I sit down with Italy's creators, contemporary artists and artisans, designers, culinary experts, heritage brands, and innovative aesthetes, and more who are defining and redefining 21st century Italy. Pull up a chair and join in. Hey, ciao Bello, welcome back. Today I am in Modena. I'm in the countryside of Modena, which is in Emilia Romagna, the breadbasket of Italy, an area that I particularly love for its food. I mean, I think everybody loves for its food and the art. And I'm sitting here with someone that I also love because she is the embodiment of all of that. She's very artistic. She's very food oriented. I'm with Lara Gilmore. How are you?
Hi, it's so great to have you here, Erica.
Well, thank you. And by the way, I should let everybody know, I'm not just sitting in the countryside. I'm sitting at Casa Maria Luigia, which is, would you like to describe a little bit about that?
Casa Maria Luigia is our newest endeavor. It's a 12-room guest house in bed and breakfast. I haven't really been able to figure out exactly how to define it yet. I like to think of it as a Osteria Francescana, our main restaurant, with 12 rooms, because the heart of Casa Maria Luigia is all about food, and not just about fine dining, but also about embracing the products from this region, Emilia Romagna, the flavors from this region, the incredible ingredients that come from here, the agricultural landscape that we're surrounded by, which is part of this breadbasket, and having our guests really feel that they are immersed in a specific place, in a specific time. We were so lucky to stumble upon this property 2.5 years ago. We fell in love with it and took a huge leap of faith and decided that we were able to open up, to renovate and to open up a different kind of hospitality. We've run a restaurant for almost 25 years now in the center of Modena.
Yeah, let's backtrack on that. So,
we have this small restaurant in the center.
Yeah, a small unknown restaurant in the middle of Modena. So 26 years ago, you came to Modena. You married Massimo Bottura, this guy, and you came to this place where it's known for prosciutto, Lambrusco, mortadella, parmigiano, balsamico, Ferrari. I mean, it's basically the best of Italy is from here. And you married this guy, and you became his business partner, or you guys are business partners, you're life partners, and he launched a restaurant that became the world's best. Is that easy to say?
Yes. I mean, when I met Massimo back in New York, we met very serendipitously in a little cafe in Soho. He was taking a sabbatical year off from the restaurant that he was running at that time in the countryside called Trattoria del Campazzo, and we really met by chance. I was trying to enter into the contemporary art world, whether it was curating or working for magazines, and making ends meet by working in restaurants as a waitress, and I got this job. And that was just this great meeting of minds, and he invited me to Modena to come see where he lived and where he was from, and I fell in love with the place because it was, not everybody knows where Modena is. It's kind of off the beaten track, and yet it's the middle of everything. It's right smack in the middle of the country. It's very easy to get to by trains, by planes, by highways, and yet it was a city that for me was a completely new discovery in terms of its food culture, and so through Massimo's eyes I was able to discover all these amazing things about Italy that I didn't know. I actually didn't marry Massimo first. I married the restaurant first.
Oh, wow.
So we decided to open a restaurant together. And the opening day of the restaurant, I happened to be in the United States for unplanned circumstances. And on that half an hour before the opening, Massimo called me in New York and asked me basically to marry him over the phone. And years later, I realized that marriage proposal was really a marriage proposal to marry the restaurant and to marry a project and to marry an idea. And we got married 3 months later. The restaurant opened. And it's been our lifetime. It's been our first baby and what keeps us together and it keeps us focused. Osteria Francescana was Massimo's provocation, thinking about in an area where traditional food is parallel with religious practices and tortellini. If you don't believe in God, you believe in tortellini. Really trying to shake up that tradition, but in a positive way, in a constructive way, not to necessarily deconstruct the Emilian kitchen or the Italian kitchen, but reconstruct it, to think about the things that maybe had gone a little bit astray during the years, especially during the economic boom and some of, losing quality and focus on what were the true flavors and ingredients that needed to be used in that kitchen, and just trying to give it a little bit of shape and future. And so that became our restaurant project, and years of difficulty, struggle, but eventually over the last 25 years, we were able to become a very well-known restaurant, and a restaurant that is actually bringing people from all over the world to Modena. So here I am, arriving in Modena, never having spent lots of time in Italy, but never really understanding where Modena was or what it was about. And then my whole life has been dedicated the last 25 years to making people know where Modena is and get them to come to Modena and eat in Modena and walk around the town. And now that we have Casa Maria Luigia, actually spend 24, 36, 48 hours in this beautiful part of the country.
So we're about 12 kilometers from the center. Is that correct?
12 kilometers by bike. Yep.
12 kilometers by bike,
On
right?
the bike trail. I don't know exactly by car. But it's like a 10 to 15 minute drive.
And we're in the full countryside, which I love because it's also really flat. There's a lot of great trees, a lot of green, but it's really flat. And I don't know why this makes me so happy. Like, you can see
fields,
for miles.
Big sky. The light here is very particular because of the fields, the different changing colors of the fields. Right now, a lot of fields have been harvested, so we've got this really earthy color. The soil has been tilled, and so the light that reflects is colors of brown, but then it'll start to be green even in early January and February when the early grasses start to come in. And, you see this whole transformation of the countryside around you, which is amazing. And I didn't know anything about this until 2 years ago when we started renovating, and I was here every morning at 7:30 to open up for the construction team, and I started to see the changing of the seasons from a completely different point of view, which was agriculture.
So wait. So 2 years ago, you weren't even in the suburbs ever, not even you weren't in the country. So you come out here and you and Massimo find this property and you say, it looks like something we could live in, even though we could do something with, even though you guys are Modena people, town people.
Backstory: we walked into this beautiful property that had been abandoned for about 10 years, but had great bones. It was not falling apart. It had, roofs were still intact. You could see where the renovations had gone on over the last 200 years.
So this is the building's 200 years old.
Yeah, the family had left about 10 years ago, and there were, on the top floors, an apartment had been renovated in the 1980s. There was another wing of the house that hadn't been touched since the 1960s. There was a beautiful carriage house that had been turned into this awful garage and custodian's apartment. Everything was resounding, though, with this great sense of waiting for people. We walked into that space and I just had this feeling that the house was waiting for people, to be filled with people. And immediately Massimo and I looked at each other and we thought, we were looking for a small country home for weekends because we're working all the time. We never have any time to get away. I wanted something close by, a place to bring our dogs, to have a garden. And when we saw the property, I thought, well, it's too much for us. We need to fill it with people. And how are we going to fill it with people? Massimo had his eyes on the carriage house. He said this carriage house could be so beautiful for a small restaurant. We have so many requests to do a dinner party for 12 or for 20. Our restaurant can't cater to those kinds of numbers. It's a small restaurant with 12 tables. And so all of a sudden he was thinking, carriage house, this is going to be where we're going to create a second Osteria Francescana. I was looking inside the rooms and I went up the stairs filled with cobwebs, and it already looked like a perfect structure to have a small bed and breakfast. I love breakfast in Emilia Romagna. Nobody really has breakfast in Emilia Romagna. Everyone's gone on to their coffee and cornetto, the bar, 5-minute breakfast. But there's so many incredible ingredients coming from my Anglo-Saxon American background, with great eggs, frittata, sausages, gnocco fritto. I've always been dreaming about pulling these ingredients together and making them into the ideal breakfast. And so we just started dreaming each in our own direction about what the house could become. And without really drawing up a business plan or thinking it through properly, we thought 3 rooms, then 6 rooms, then 9 rooms, and we finally landed on the number 12.
So there are 12 rooms, and the rooms are beautiful. I think, though, I will tell you, the two things that when I walked in here, the first thing is I walked into the entrance and I was like, oh, I feel like I'm at home, because the couch, the magazines, I don't know, I was just like, this just feels like I'm in someone's house, and I think it might be my house. And I loved it. Immediately had this homey feeling. And then the art. Because this is, I know that everything that you both do is about food, but I also love how much you guys love art, contemporary art. It makes me feel so good because, you see a lot of these pieces in museums, you see them in magazines, but you never really see people living with them. And this is, for me, that kind of experience where you get to live with incredible works of art the way I think they were meant to be. I don't think they were all meant to be on walls.
I don't think they were meant to be locked up, either in a collector's vault, because they're so valuable, you can't even look at them, or locked away in someone's home. And when we opened Osteria Francescana, we had a very small, very humble collection. But as we began collecting more art, the first thing we wanted to do was put it in the walls of the restaurant to share it. We felt that it was kind of a landscape of ideas and a way of communicating with our guests visually what we were thinking about, what was on our mind, the things that we liked, images that were stimulating for us, sculptures or art that was provocative. And we never had a doubt that Casa Maria Luigia would be filled with art. Some of the art comes from Osteria Francescana, things that have been taken off the walls and either migrated to our house and were, in one of my children's bedrooms. And then I thought, well, God, that would be great for bedroom number 12 or number 7. And then other works that we specifically bought for the house. Number 1, because we had always been dreaming about buying, for example, an Ai Weiwei piece. And when we found this Ai Weiwei triptych in Lego that was a perfect size for the main living room, it would have never fit in our home. It would have been a shame to have had it in our home. And it's just so, in a way, I don't want to use the word satisfying, but it gives me so much joy to see people's reaction to a piece of art like that. And not everybody likes it. Some people are like, oh, how is it possible? So the image is of the artist, Chinese dissident artist, very iconoclastic. It's actually a self-portrait of him based on a photograph holding a 2,000-year-old traditional vase. The first image, he's looking at the camera with the vase. The second image, he's looking at the camera and his arms are raised and the vase is dropping like, uh-oh. The third image is the vase crashing on the floor into pieces. And there's some people who are appalled. How could you break something like that? How can you go and be so disrespectful of the past? But that series of images for us is so hopeful because in a way it's saying we can look at the past and we can break with the past, but look at the possibilities. Look at everything you have on the floor, all those pieces, picking them up, putting them together, reconstructing them, and turning them into a new kind of future. Without disregarding the past, you're actually bringing it forward. Taking the best of the past and bringing it into the future is a message that's very powerful for us. Then, of course, the fact that it's in Lego makes it friendly and fun. It's not
so
this like
playful,
oil painting, from Caravaggio, or it's Lego. It's also going to be eternal. It's going to be the last standing, thing that's in that house. No matter what happens 500 years from now, those Legos will be around.
And then you'll probably have, I feel like the Tracy Emin piece will be around on the walls. There's so many great pieces.
So we have a Tracy Emin piece that when Massimo found it at auction, he showed me the picture in the auction catalog. He's like, oh, this would be so great. The piece is called Red, White, and Fucking Blue. And I'm American, so I thought immediately, oh my God, well, I don't want people to think that, I'm, not a good American citizen or I don't love my country. I've been living as an expat for so many years. But as we put that up on the wall, and I realized the minute that we put it up, that red, white, and fucking blue is not a negative about your national colors or your... It's like red, white, and fucking blue. Like, we are doing this. We are going all out. We are going to be as red, white, and fucking blue as we can in everything we do. It's an affirmative. It's saying we're not going to hold back on anything, whether it's the art, the food, the landscape, trying to do the best we can with our, organic gardening, creating a home away from home for travelers. And so for me, that red, white, and fucking blue is like, yes.
The affirmation. Well,
Yes, we can.
Let's talk a little bit about the landscape here, because this is a beautiful, beautiful property. And I know that you mentioned there's a beautiful pool. There's the tennis court with the Joseph Boys. There's the swing that I was swinging on. And then in the front, there's a huge field.
Right.
What's in that field?
Well, Erica knows what I'm so, one of the I've fallen into many roles taking on this project, and I'm a doer. I like to think things through, but more than anything, I like to think things through while I'm doing other things. And so I'm the main gardener here, vegetable garden, flower arrangements, making sure the rooms are in order. I just had someone come and fix a curtain, and of course I want to be there. One thing I've learned about living in Italy is that it's all about your human relationships with people.
Exactly.
Whether you have an artisan who's helping you upholster a sofa, someone who's going to frame your beautiful works of art, or even help you hang them on the wall properly, lighting, et cetera, et cetera. And so with this property, we have this very large field, about 2 hectares of land, that was basically grown for alfalfa, for feeding Parmigiano-Reggiano cows, which is really great. But I kind of felt like we could do more with that. So farro, spelt, is a heritage grain, a beautiful grain that we use in our kitchen at Osteria Francescana. We grind it to make flour for our bread, so a percentage of our bread has spelt in it. And we also use the whole grain for our staff meals and some of our dishes in Francescana, but even more so at Maria Luigia. So I decided to plant farro, and organically. And farro is also a great grain to transform a non-organic field into an organic field. It takes a couple of years. But now I have, 20 huge bags of farro that I have to find someone to grind to turn into the flour. How am I going to get it there? Where is it going to be stored? How am I going to, all of a sudden I have all these incredible projects to solve, which is very stimulating for me. Hopefully we'll be able to package some farro for all our guests at Casa Maria Luigia. And so they'll go home with that and a recipe of something they can make, and then maybe they've eaten here
and they can
in our home
they
kitchen.
Start pushing farro. I can't call it spelt. I just don't like.
Spelt just isn't it's not such a nice word. And farro.
Farro is like
so beautiful and hearty and
it's like
wholesome.
sensual, and I love it. It's
you can
like
use
carnal.
it in soups. It's kind of like a barley. But it's a little bit crunchier and nuttier than barley, and actually is much harder to overcook. So for those of us who are not brilliant in the kitchen, you can go wrong with farro and pretty much fix it up in any way you want to.
We make salads. I love cold salads with farro. I love it.
So another thing that we do at Casa Maria Luigia to create that sense of home away from home, in the carriage house, we ended up creating our restaurant experience. We have a professional kitchen there where we serve both breakfast and an evening 9-course tasting menu from Osteria Francescana. But in the homey, comfy, green kitchen of Casa Maria Luigia, we have this amazing giving refrigerator. I call it like the giving tree. I don't know if you ever read the book by Shel Silverstein of The Giving Tree. Well, we have the giving refrigerator. So this refrigerator is like my dream refrigerator. I grew up with a mom who was cooking all the time, and then left home, went to college, boarding school, went to college off on my own. And I often long for that refrigerator that had so many yummy things, leftovers in it, and I could always just pull out something, there was something to eat. So I wanted to create here for our guests who are travelers. Oftentimes they're coming from Rome or Florence or Venice and on their way to another part of Italy, and maybe they stop for a day or two or just a night. The idea that they could open up this refrigerator on their own, they don't need a waiter or a server to do it for them, and find these small singular portions of delicious healthy snacks, whether it's fresh salads from our garden or a farro salad. On Saturdays we have chickpeas with yogurt and whatever vegetables in season, whether it's cucumbers or peppers, or we're moving into pumpkin and cauliflower season. We have fresh fruits in there. We have yummy little snacks. Maybe later we'll go in and see what today's menu is, but it's constantly changing.
I think
it's constantly seasonal.
Sure Darius has already been there.
2 comments that remain with me was young American who's living in Berlin, a journalist working for Bloomberg, saying his 30s. He walked in and he said, "Oh my God," opened the refrigerator and said, "I feel like I'm back at my parents' house, but even better because my parents aren't here and there's a bottle of wine that I can open and I can sit down and have a snack, and it's not a full meal. It's not restaurant, but it's that sense that you're just sitting at the kitchen counter having a meal. And at that kitchen counter, someone else is going to come along who's staying at Casa Maria Luigia and open the refrigerator and get the same thing you got or something else and sit beside you. And inevitably, that's going to break into a conversation of where you're from and where you're going and what you're doing and why are you here. So someone from Sydney can meet another person from the UK or from Berlin or from Atlanta, Georgia, Taiwan. We've had guests from all over the world. And once again, creating a space for community, however temporary it may be. The community can be formed around two people eating at a countertop who've never met, serving themselves, a glass of wine or pouring a glass of wine for someone else or saying, would you like me to put on water for tea? It's amazing how people are so intuitive about a kitchen, and they actually, once they've eaten something, their fork, their plate, they tend to just put it in the sink, or I've seen even our guests put things in the dishwasher. So there's this amazing sense of, for the time that you're here at Casa Maria Luigia, you're part of something. You're part of this community of Casa Maria Luigia.
I think you feel. I think that you do. You feel like you're at home. And I remember when I stayed here in June, I stood in front of. I opened up the refrigerator and I did one of my favorite things to do is I like just opening a refrigerator and staring into it. It's like my thing. I just stand there and I like to look and I like to just. And it makes me happy. Like it makes me sad when sometimes our refrigerator doesn't have like the days that it doesn't have a lot of food, and then you just close it immediately.
Right.
But when it's full, you get this sense of satisfaction. And I just stood there and I was like, this is great. Like I'm looking in. I was like, I'm gonna have that salad. Maybe later I'll have a snack.
It's exactly, and it's very stimulating for our team as well. So we have this great culinary team, and not only are they working on breakfast and starting the wood-burning oven that a lot of our breakfast treats are made in there, but then they create all these single portion dishes for our guests. They get put in the refrigerator. Every once in a while, they're checking on the kitchen to see if they need more grissini or crackers or dip, or if something is, all out of the cupcakes. They have some more they've made upstairs, so they fill up the refrigerator again. And then the next morning, when they start working on breakfast, they go in like little, mice, and they look in there. And this sense of satisfaction when the refrigerator's empty and they know that people have had all these delicious things is really rewarding for them and different than a restaurant service. Restaurant service, you've plated something, beautifully plated, plate comes back clean. This is just much more about nourishing rather than making it kind of a theatrical experience. And so there's a lot of love going on there and exchange back and forth.
That's when we were driving over here, and I asked you in the car, I said, how different is this kind of hospitality than a restaurant hospitality? That's what you were saying, that it's nourishing. In fact, I'm going to let you put it in your own words, what you were telling me earlier today.
There's a lot of sharing going on here, which often can happen in small doses in a restaurant like Osteria Francescana, but it's a very short exchange because our guests are at the table for 3, maybe 4 hours. We have an opportunity to tell our stories and see the experience they're having at the table, but it's how do you prolong that? And so Casa Maria Luigia has been a way of us being able to share many of the things we love, not just fine dining or Massimo and our culinary team's beautiful creations, but also to share the love of gardening, to share feelings about contemporary art or reactions to contemporary art.
Your music collection.
And then the music room. I haven't told you about the music room. So the other reason that we ended up purchasing this house was when we first saw it, the former owner, very well-cultured woman, book lover, had created in one of the rooms this incredibly beautiful library. Handmade, carved, wood library. Massimo went in, and the first thing that he started thinking was, my vinyl record collection. Finally, all those records that no longer fit on our shelves at home, they've been sitting on the floor, are going to have a home. Incredibly enough, very shortly after we saw the property, before we put a bid on it, Massimo was contacted by a recent widow. Her husband was a surgeon here in Modena. We never had an opportunity to meet him. Not only a surgeon, but he was a record collector and collecting incredible, rare jazz records. So in his last will and testimony, he had written, because he had read an article about Massimo, and Massimo was passionate about music, he had written that he would love for the collection to be offered first to Massimo Bottura because he wanted this collection to stay in Modena and to go in the hands of someone who was going to love it and take care of it, but also with the idea that maybe it would be shared someday with other people. And so
That is amazing.
the record collection got bought without even looking at one record. He had this incredible, Excel, file of 8,000 records that he had collected. And so the records were the first thing that were moved into this house before it even had been renovated. The library was in perfect condition. And so there you go. The record room is for everyone to take out a record. Massimo's added also some old rock and roll, some country, some classical music. So there's a little bit of taste in music for everyone.
When I walked in there and I saw, and I'm not super tech. I know what a record player is. I don't know what is that. The recording machine. I don't even know what to call it.
So in
It is
addition
beautiful.
to our vinyl record collection, we also found what I call like the new Spotify, which is a 1970 Maxwell reel-to-reel tape. So reel-to-reel tape is about 3 hours of recordings. We bought about 8 of these from there are these like jazz record dealers around the world. Recordings of old jazz records on this reel-to-reel tape recorder. It's the older version of the tape recorder. It's connected to our stereo system. So we have jazz running freely through the house. We can then, after 3 hours, either rewind it or change the reel-to-reel. We've all become experts at reel-to-reel. At one time, that's how people listened to music.
Yeah.
If you didn't have your cassette tape or your 8-track tape. This was, pre-CDs and everything else. But it creates this really great soundtrack because you can hear all of the distortion, all of the details of the vinyl record, and creates mood and atmosphere in addition to the music itself.
No, it's beautiful. It is so beautiful, and the sound quality is great. Like I sat in there and I wanted to touch it, but I was like, I will.
So
never touch
there's
it.
one chair in that room. I've been able to sort of sneak in a little stool and a kind of like a small little lounge chair in the corner, but basically it's all about this one chair in front of the stereo, and it's the chair is made by Capellini. It's called the Proust, and it's designed by Alessandro Mendini, and it's this huge kind of ironic play on a classical sort of armchair that's very overdone and very elaborate, and it's painted all over in these different colors, and the idea is that room is for someone to sit down, put on their favorite record, and have a moment to themselves. Other things have happened in that room. There's been parties where there's, 10 people gathering in there. But my favorite night in Casa Maria Luigia, we had a couple visiting us from Texas. It was their 45th wedding anniversary. They had dinner at Francescana at Maria Luigia, so our 9-course tasting menu here on the property the night before. And that night, they decided not to make any dinner reservations. They were drinking wine, had a little snack in the kitchen, and then they started putting on records, and they were dancing. Just the two of them in the house. Everyone was out eating somewhere else, and they pretty much had the whole house to themselves and spent 3 hours dancing and putting on records. And to me, that's the heart and soul of Casa Maria Luigia. Find your space. Try to create as many different possible atmospheres as you can, whether it's a cocktail room, the kitchen, the gardens. There's a little cabin in the middle of the property where two lovers could sit, or someone who wants to read a book or just meditate. But create these spaces for people to have new memories.
I like that. I'm thinking maybe I'm hoping I get Darius to dance tonight.
We'll
see what happens. He does not dance. That's a beautiful story. Now I have a question for you because I ate something for breakfast. So I know that the Emilia Romagna breakfast, or the Emilia breakfast, is really important to you, and I don't think anybody. It's not something that you see at the coffee bar.
Well, I don't think it's something that actually exists anymore, and it's based on a lot of stories that were told to me by a lot of the farmers here in this area. So once I got to know the farming community, and we'd sit around and talk, that their parents and their grandparents would go out into the fields at 4:30, 5 in the morning, as soon as there was light, and then would come back after their first 3 hours of work, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, and have breakfast. And breakfast was cotechino, and breakfast was gnocco frito, and it was a slice of prosciutto or mortadella, and it was really like much more of a very hearty meal to give them the energy and the calories to then go back out in the fields.
That's what I had. It was the cotechino with maybe some zabaglione on a gnocco
And
frito.
as brisolone underneath.
That was
So we've put together this combination,
umami.
which is not a traditional combination. You're not going to find it anywhere else unless we've had an influence in the way people think about breakfast here. But basically, this brisolone is a cake from Mantova made with almonds, a little bit of brown sugar. We've put a little salt in it to make it between savor and sweet. Turn it into a cookie instead of a cake. It's very dry and crunchy, but it has this great almond base to it, almonds and butter. Cotechino sausage is typically eaten at Christmas, and it's a sausage that's boiled. So it has a little bit of a gelatin quality to it. I've never really loved it, even though it has great flavor. So I always thought about how could I make cotechino more delicious, and the idea was putting it into a wood-burning oven. We were given this incredible wood-burning oven made here in Modena.
the one that says Maria Luigia.
It says Maria Luigia on it. I think we made pizza in it once, and then decided, hey, let's give ourselves a challenge of thinking about everything else that we could make in this oven that isn't necessarily pizza. So we had Brussels sprouts in the garden and started roasting Brussels sprouts. Started thinking about focaccia. How could we make focaccia in there? Jessica Roosevelt, our head chef, who'd come from Osteria Francescana, got inspired. Let's try to see if we can make a frittata and cook it in a cast iron skillet inside the wood-burning oven. Everything taking on this kind of smoky quality. And cotechino inevitably went into that oven and became the most delicious thing that you
Ever.
want to have in the morning. And so it's crunchy on the outside. It's lost all of its sort of fat or extra grease. It's all been drained out of it, and then gets crunchy. And so it's only flavor and this beautiful, light, I don't know how to describe it. Then we put zabaglione on top.
Which is, to me, the icing on the cake. Oh, my goodness.
So you have sweet and savory, the almond biscuit. It's a little bit of an umami.
Yep. It is morning umami.
It's not too many calories at the end of the day. I've done some sort of like a calorie count. It's less calories than a Big Mac. It's less calories than a lot of things we eat in our daily lives. I think it's less calories than a bran muffin. So much more delicious. And it's got this sense of nourishment and being hearty, and you're in the countryside. So I'm very happy with that part of the breakfast, and just being able to introduce something that's very traditional, local, but in a completely different context.
So I have two questions that I think our listeners will want to know. The first question is, I know anybody can stay here, but can anybody come to dinner here? Do you have to stay here?
You don't have to stay here.
Okay.
So we only have 24 seats.
And it's picnic style, right? Is that what it's called?
3 communal tables.
Communal tables.
3 communal tables. Each seats 8 people. We have an open kitchen, so part of the experience of dining at this version of Francescana is also being able to see the kitchen at work. There's no wall between the kitchen and the dining room. Our guests are also invited to stand up and see what people are doing or see how something is plated. I think that adds an element of surprise, but also great joy. Someone who has been wanting to dine with us and then actually not only get to eat the plate, but see how it's made. But there's so much amazing energy that happens from the moment people sit down at the table before they're even served their first dish. The sense of, hi, I am Lara. And you meet your neighbor, you start having a conversation. They could be 2 people with completely different political points of view, different age groups, different economic background, so many differences that all come together at the table, and everyone is sort of equal at the table. And there's always a moment that they can share their stories, their lives, their experience of having that meal together. So it's been very exciting to see that come to life and to see that happen.
And that you were saying...
so anyone can... So basically, our guests who are staying here, if they're staying for 2 nights, one night they'll eat there, but they're not necessarily going to eat 2 nights there. The menu is the same. And so that opens up places for people who are traveling through Modena. Maybe they weren't able to get a table in Osteria Francescana and they want to have an Osteria Francescana experience. So a table can be booked, a place at the table can be booked on our website at casamarialuigia.com. You don't have to be sleeping here. I think it's best to have the full experience, but we welcome outsiders as well.
And part of that experience you were saying earlier is that it's a 9 courses.
It's a 9-course set menu, so I don't think of it as a restaurant, but I really think of it as a dining experience. The beverages, there's a beverage pairing included that could be alcoholic or non. The non-alcoholic are all kinds of fun non-alcoholic cocktails that we make and mixtures of juices and herbs, and we try to keep it fun and exciting for our diners. The beverage pairing changes. All Italian wines, a lot of small producers. We go from very local to down to the tip of Sicily. We like to introduce our guests to wines that they may never have heard of or tried before. And so that's exciting for us as well.
And it's, I know, I've read a few things. It's the greatest hits. What can one expect on the menu?
So I like to divide up the menu into 3, since it's 9 courses, into sort of 3 moments. First 3 moments are our starters, and our starters are some of the dishes that maybe no one has heard about. They are right now we're serving a dish called Tribute to Normandy, which is based on Massimo's first experience leaving Italy and traveling with his older brothers to the coast of Normandy and Mont Saint-Michel, and having this first encounter with unknown foods and getting out of his comfort zone, and how that was sort of the early seed planted for him for the curiosity that then grew within him to become a chef and travel and eat strange and unknown foods. Then we move on to a dish called Autumn in New York, which is a tribute not only to the city of New York, but also to Billie Holiday, who rendered the jazz standard Autumn in New York so famous. It's a memory of cooking with Dave Chang, shopping in the Union Square Farmers Market, and also an ode to the seasons, because Autumn in New York is a dish that has a particular shape and form. There's a broth, there's the shape of an apple, there's always an apple in every version of Autumn in New York, but Autumn in New York, the recipe changes with every season. And so Autumn in New York is different than fall autumn in New York or winter or spring. And so the idea that a recipe and an idea can evolve over the seasons, just the way a jazz standard is sung by performed by different musicians. And so this relationship with music and a city where Massimo and I met and that we love and adore. And then the next course we serve, this summer we were serving pesto and abstract, which is not a pasta with pesto, but the idea that a pesto is an idea, and then it can be made with whatever ingredients you have available and are in your region or in your pantry. And so we were putting together basil but other herbs and trying to make a pesto that has a resounding flavor of basil and of that traditional pesto recipe, but can also expand into touch other flavors. It was a custard made with pine nuts and Parmigiano Reggiano, and then this very intense pesto, different herbs from the garden, changing constantly.
So your garden itself is also bringing a lot into the kitchen.
Yes, this dish was definitely inspired by the Maria Luigia garden, and we had the green beans that we had grown here and our potatoes, and so it was an ode to that kitchen. Now that dish is transferred into the fall, and it's become Snails Under the Snow, and this is a story about Massimo looking out at the winter landscape, the snow falling outside, thinking about where the snails were, whether they were living under the snow, how many layers of earth they had crawled under to stay warm and stay alive. And so he recreated this sort of sense of the layers of the earth itself. There's toasted hazelnuts, there's breadcrumb, there's coffee grinds, there's a little bit of smoky whiskey in there, porcini mushroom, gelatin, all these very earthy flavors put together to recreate a sense of what's under the surface of the earth, and then a classic snails with parsley and butter, and on top of this very light foam of garlic as if it was the snow. And so this is a poetic dish and also a dish about the changing of the seasons and asking questions about nature. Then we move on to our what we like to call like the diva plates, and the diva plates is the heart of this menu, and they are some of our most classic iconic dishes: 5 ages of Parmigiano Reggiano, the crunchy part of the lasagna, which is playing with Emilian traditions of lasagna and turning it into kind of a playful dish for children. Adults who want to be children, eat with your hands. The lasagna, Massimo tells a story about growing up in a large family in Emilia Romagna, where all his brothers were always fighting about taking off the most imperfect burned corner of the
burnt
lasagna.
corner, yeah.
And so we've reconstructed the burned corner and sharing that
That's the
burnt
best
corner memory
part.
with everybody. And then the main course is called Beautiful Psychedelic Veal, not flame grilled. This is a dish based on a painting by Damien Hirst that we saw in 2012 in a Burger King during the Olympics, a huge spin painting, and it's all about the combination of fast and slow, pop art and fine art, fine dining and popular dining, and how you can bring that together in a plate and share all of that with our guests. Basically, we cook a piece of veal sous vide, which is very slowly cooked as opposed to a fast hamburger on the grilled. It has smoky flavors that we give it from basically turning all of our vegetable trimmings into a carbon ash and painting it with this carbon ash. This one small piece of meat is then surrounded by vegetable I would say vegetable paint in a way. There are 5 different colors. There's red, which is a beet and balsamic vinegar. There's a green chlorophyll. There's a yellow pepper. There's a orange pumpkin now, and a nice creamy splash potato. It's not a mashed potato. And so these colors are splashed onto the plate. You get more vegetables in one dish than you could ever imagine. And they create this very colorful painting based on psychedelic Damien Hirst. And then the last 3 courses, I can't reveal them all because I don't want to, there's one surprise in there. But basically we have 2 desserts and what Massimo likes to call before the dessert a Modenese sorbet. Of course, knowing Massimo, it's not cold. It has nothing to do with ice cream. It's an ode to his mother and his grandmother and a recipe that he will not change and maybe should not change, and kind of a message after all these fun adventures in cooking and playing with your grandmother's recipe that in the middle of a menu like that, you can always have something that reminds you that some things should never change.
Now, the last question I wanted to ask you then is why is it called Casa Maria Luigia?
Well, the former owner was named Luigi Magelli. Luigi Magelli inherited this property from his father, who was a big landowner and running a working farm. But Luigi Magelli had grown up quite spoiled and went to university and lived in town and was a little bit of a what they call in Italy a fighetto. So was cultured in the arts, and he thought, well, why am I going to move out to the countryside and run a farm? That's not what didn't go to college for that. So he inherited this property, and he was actually the one in 1900 who began transforming it into what it is today. So there was already this seed planted that this should be a place to entertain people. He created a pond so that that his guests could come and he could take them around the agricultural
Which
pond.
we're sitting next to right now.
And a little boat ride and a boathouse. He also created a fountain, a grotto fountain, so the guests would come and visit that fountain. He planted trees in not a random way, in any way whatsoever, very intentional landscaping.
And you told me these trees were always
beautiful
here.
12
from when
oak
you got
trees, an alley of yew trees, taxodiums. It created a root cellar.
There's like a weeping willow, I think.
There's an old weeping willow. And so there was already this idea that the landscape was not only for agriculture, but also for leisure, pastime, lying out on the lawn, looking at the roses. And so more than 117 years later, we come across the property. Of course, some of the trees had been lost, but there was still good bones and beautiful heritage trees here. And so we tried to work with that, not transform it too much, keep it very much with its identity, and just keep the party going. As Luigi Magelli would be happy. So the L and the M were already there. It was already part of the DNA, and that's Lara and Massimo. And Massimo's mother's name was Maria Luigia. Maria Luigia is not only Massimo's mother, but she was also the second wife of Napoleon, who Napoleon gave her the city of Parma, and Colorno is where she had her beautiful property. And so the thing about Maria Luigia, Massimo's mother was named after Maria Luigia, is that she was loved and adored because she brought culture and art and music and theater to the city of Parma, and in a way that Luigi Magelli had also brought culture and landscaping and the idea of entertaining here to this property. And so Massimo and I, as L and M, or M and L, wanted to contribute to that as well, bringing our art and our love of music and food once again to this property. So layers and layers and layers of meaning.
I think you guys have done an excellent job, and I think everything about what you guys are doing is also about telling a story from the past, but also a story that then I or somebody else can tell too. You know, you walk out of here with stories, which I think is, you know, when you were describing his dishes and all the stories that go into what you're eating, or when you're describing the tortellante, which we'll talk about a little bit later, or just Luigi. I mean, these are beautiful stories, and there are so many stories that come out of just staying here. I can't wait to walk into the kitchen.
Let's see what's in the kitchen.
Yeah, let's do that. So thanks so much for sitting with me. I had a wonderful conversation. I'm so happy. This space, I automatically always feel at home here, so thank you.
Hey, I'm back and just finished listening to the outtakes of this episode. Lara and I had a great conversation about biking in Modena. I love how she captures Modena and the Emilia Romagna vibe in words. Listen in.
I'm gonna get a mountain bike. That's my Christmas wish. It's on my Christmas wish list.
You seem like you're going. You're checking a little. You seem like you're doing a lot of distance. Is that correct?
Yes,
because I see it on Instagram.
I'm
like,
starting,
damn.
and I haven't been boasting. I've just did 100 in Parma over the weekend. This gravel, these things about gravel that's so cool is there's this whole non-competitive gravel world, which they organized. 150 kilometer rides on a Sunday. One was the Delta the Po River from Argenta to Comacchio.
So you're doing this with other people?
Doing this with other people. There's a whole calendar. Every Sunday I could be out with different people. Just in Emilia Romagna.
Yep. I make this face because you're so lucky with this countryside, because it's just, there's so much to do.
So Saturday I drove to Parma. We headed off at 8 o'clock. And, 6 hours with some breaks. People were back. And then you have gnocco fritto and salumi with this whole group. Some are ex-professional cyclists. Other people are young hipsters.
How did you get into this?
And just because I was here. So Casa Maria Luigia is located between the Panaro River, the Torrente Tepido, which is a small river, and then not too far away, about half an hour biking, there's also the Secchia, Fiume Secchia. So it's between these rivers, and that historically Modena has been fighting with Bologna and its neighbors over these rivers and who owns the rights to the rivers, things like that. But 5 minutes from here, I discovered the banks of the rivers in Italy are so amazing because they're raised river banks. So when you're raised, it's a flat landscape here, except when you head up to the hills. But basically, the agricultural fields are a flat landscape, but the riverbeds are raised 20, 30 meters above, and so you have this great view of the landscape.
So you're oh wow, you're above everything then. I don't think, because I'm trying to think when we ride in Rome, we're like, our banks are below.
The riverbanks are raised up above. That is partially because they also serve as barriers. So when the rivers overflow, so that they don't go into properties, townland, churches. The raised riverbanks were part of the irrigation system and a way of protecting homes and agricultural fields from being overflown. So do you do this every week? Because I feel like on Instagram you do it a lot, and you do it in the morning, which makes me feel like I got to get up now too. I think it's part of a transformation that's happened since we started working on this project, Casa Maria Luigia. So the last 25 years, I've been in the center of Modena. My home is there. The restaurant is there. Our whole life is there, whether it's between the market, going around the streets for the artisans we have, our team. We flow out onto the streets. We have a building across the street where we have our prep kitchen and then the restaurant. And so I've always been on the cobblestones of Modena. 2 years ago when we bought this property, I'm not that far away. It's 15 minutes by car, 12 kilometers, but it's a whole different Emilia Romagna. It's a whole different landscape. I'm surrounded by agricultural fields, by rivers, by cyclists. So my connection with nature is changing. My desire also to spend more time outside is changing. My time outside used to be spent walking my dog, and now my time outside is spent taking care of the gardens, taking care of the vegetable garden, getting on my bicycle, walking the fields, meeting with our local neighboring farmers, just to know what's going on around me. And so my whole relationship with Modena has actually changed. I was here 26 years, and I didn't know that all of this existed, and yet it was just 15-minute drive from the restaurant. So it's amazing what you discover when you get out of your comfort zone, physically, mentally, emotionally, and then decide that you're going to get to know something else and get to know it intimately.
And commit to it, yeah. But it's kind of funny because everything that you said that you got to know reminds me of the things of what I was growing up with, like bike riding everywhere, knowing all my neighbors, gardening. And, I live in a city as well. And I don't do that anymore at all. I walk my dog. And sometimes I ride my bike, but my bike is not for bike riding as much as it's for transportation.
Right, for city riding and getting from one place to the other.
So it's kind of like a return. What you've described for me would be a return to my childhood when it was just everything was outside and it was great.
Well, maybe there's this, I turned 50, February 2018. And I have to say that turning 50 was this moment where I really kind of embraced the idea that I sleep to wake. There's so many things left to do, so many things I still have to discover about myself, but not only about myself, about the area that I live in and the place that I've committed to live and to promote, and falling in love with so many different parts of Emilia Romagna.
For more information on Casa Maria Luigia, go to casamarialuigia.com, and you can find all the information and links for Casa Maria Luigia and more on my website, ciaobella.co. Ciao, Bella! Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Ciao Bella. If you'd like to know more about today's guest, please visit ciaobella.co and click on the podcast link, or go directly to ciaobella.co/podcast. Want more Italy? You can find all my episodes on iTunes and Spotify and Stitcher. When you have time, subscribe to iTunes and rate the podcast. What are you waiting for? And if you want to be part of the podcast, email me or DM me your Italy questions. To learn more about me and my work, go to my website, ericafirpo.com, and follow my Italy adventures on Instagram at ericafirpo. Ciao, Bella! And a very big thank you and hug to Massimiliano Yonta and Disc to Disc Studios, the producers of Ciao Bella, who continue to make me sound and feel great.